It's time for an Out and About with Jamie Grout podcast, and this is another Best of podcast. Busy week with the Iowa State Fair going on. I'll be working at the WHO Crystal Studios today selling WHO merchandise. Hope you'll stop in and say hi. If you get a little warm on the fairgrounds walking around, well, come on out to the WHO Crystal Studios across from the DNR building where you can see the wildlife and all the fish, because I'm told it is the most well air-conditioned building on the fairgrounds. I'd love to see you. And then I'll be broadcasting with my co-host Greg Woods on Sunday afternoon from 3 to 5. Going to have lots of great guests. I don't know whether I'll be able to come out and see you or not, but there's plenty of windows. You can wave at me as I'm broadcasting in the studios. I'd love to see you then. This topic today is one that's near and dear to my heart, because as a young child I was petit mal epileptic. There's two different forms of epilepsy. There's grand mal and petit mal. And as we get into the story, we'll explain the difference of epilepsy and how old I was when I found out I was epileptic. And that'll be part of our trivia question that we'll do on Sunday morning also. But first, let's get to our sponsors today, including Newton Clinic. And this time of year, heat exhaustion can sneak up fast, especially on kids, older adults, and anyone outdoors with long stretches. Man, I'll tell you, you need to stay hydrated, because if you watch for heavy sweating, dizziness, nausea, or confusion, it could be a problem. Shade plus water, rest, it's usually the fix. If symptoms don't improve, don't wait it out. A pro tip for you there: by the time you feel thirsty, you're already mildly dehydrated. The folks at Newton Clinic are here for you. Newton Clinic, man, I'll tell you, you go in there, you'll be treated like family at Newton Clinic. And I want to send out best wishes to my doctor that I've had for a number of years, Dr. Dwayne Jolivet, who'll be retiring in November. I have an appointment to see him in September. I'm going to send him best wishes, but boy, he's taken good care of me over the years. And I'll be switching to another new provider. And one of those new providers is Kinsey Heiser. And yeah, you might want to switch to her or one of the other doctors if one of your doctors is retiring anytime soon at Newton Clinic. Another great sponsor, of course, is Ryan's Tire and Auto on First Avenue in Newton, always giving to great causes. And one of the most recent causes he has donated to includes the Newton Booster Club. They asked for a donation, and of course Ryan and the crew said yes. There are a few things more important, according to his Facebook page, than the community and the kids. And so he donated to that, and he says he wants to thank the community and the Booster Club, so he made a generous donation, and he can do that. And he also made a generous donation to the school system. Ryan's Tire and Auto made a $2,000 cash donation for school supplies to the school system, and there's a picture on their Facebook page of Ryan making a donation to Kelly Sorensen of the school system for school supplies. So stop on into Ryan's Tire and Auto. Not only is he a great contributor to the school and the school system, but great service too. He's made sure that my vehicle gets to point A and point B and back. He takes care of my Hyundai Elantra and my Chrysler Town and Country van that I have, and they do a great job at Ryan's Tire and Auto on First Avenue in Newton. Another fine sponsor, Park Center, a Wesley Life community. They invite you to stay active and engaged and connected at Park Center's independent living. From wellness programs and social gatherings to cultural events and shared experiences with friends, every day brings new opportunities to learn, laugh, and make meaningful connections at Wesley Life Park Center. And they want to give out a huge thank you to Sip and Sweet for partnering with them to support individuals living with dementia. During the week of their Purple Powder Run, Sip and Sweet featured 2 special purple drinks and generously donated a portion of the sales to the Park Center Good Samaritan Fund. Their support helps make a meaningful difference in the lives of the people that they serve. If you want to find out more about Park Center, a Wesley Life community, get a hold of Lisa Zylstra at 515-791-5000. That's 515-791-5000. And as I've said so many times, the last 5 years of my sister's life spent at Park Center. They treated her good. Couldn't have asked for any better care. Also, Junie B's Food Truck. They were open last week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, and watch for their hours on Facebook. I usually share their hours every week, and they have great food there. Try their flatbread cheese pizza that they have. I've done that. And when they were at the Jasper County Fair, I tried their cheeseburgers, which were delicious, and their chicken tenders, which were yummy. So they have great food. Junie B's Eats and Treats, you'll find them located on First Avenue in Newton, right next to Casey's and O'Reilly Auto Parts. Junie B's Eats and Treats. Delicious food there at Junie B's. Another fine sponsor, Advantage Credit Union.
Let us pay you for checking with us. Hi, this is Leslie with Advantage Credit Union, inviting you to take advantage of Cha-Ching Rewards checking. Earn 3% APY on balances up to $10,000. That's up to $25 per month that ACU pays you. No minimum balance, no monthly fees. Simply do the things you're already doing and cash in at the credit union. Apply online at acuiowa.org or visit us in downtown Newton.
APY is annual percentage yield. Restrictions apply.
Federally insured by the NCUA.
It's time for an Out and About with Jamie Grout podcast, and this time around we're talking about the Epilepsy Foundation. And with me, my interview guest is Roxanne Kogel, who is Executive Director of the regional teams. And Roxanne, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
I'm interested to hear your story about epilepsy and your daughter and how you're dealing with it and what the Epilepsy Foundation is all about. But first, I'm going to tell my story about epilepsy because I don't know that people know, and maybe there's more than two types of epilepsy, but as far as I know, there are two types. And one is grand mal seizures, and the other type is petit mal or petit mal. I don't know how people want to pronounce it, but I had the petit mal epilepsy seizures when I was a young boy. And I'm not sure at what age my parents discovered it, but I might have been 5 or 6 years old. And I understand that it's very common in adolescence. But when you reach the end of adolescence, and you can correct me on any of this because I'm not an expert on it, but at the end, you either get better or worse on petit mal epilepsy. Is that correct, Roxanne?
Well, it depends on the cause of the epilepsy and the type of situation. Some individuals that are diagnosed with epilepsy when they're younger may outgrow their epilepsy and their seizures, and other individuals may go on to have epilepsy their entire lives. It's just a matter if the current treatment options manage it or not.
Well, I was very blessed and lucky because I outgrew it. And I was the last in my class to get my driver's license. And I again, feel very, very blessed. Let me tell you a little bit about how I even found out that I was epileptic and how it became lucky for me in my career that I actually had petit mal epilepsy in a way. When I was a kid, like I say, 6, 7 years old, I don't know when my parents discovered it. My parents would take me to Blank Children's Hospital to get EEGs, and when they test you, they have you do heavy breathing to make you pant, to cause you to have seizures or not, and strobe lights also. You know, you've been through the whole thing, I'm sure. And I didn't understand what any of it was about because I was just a kid, and they were saying, you know, we're doing tests on you. My parents didn't tell me. My parents didn't tell me at all. But back then, KIOA Radio had street-side studios. And I begged my parents to take me by street-side studios after one of my exams at Blank Children's Hospital. And I looked up at that DJ and I said, this guy is having fun. He's cracking jokes, playing music, and having a good time, and that's what I want to do for a living. And after that, I started playing radio in the bedroom of my house, and I've made it a career for now over 50 years in radio, so it actually was kind of a blessing. But my parents didn't tell anyone that I had epilepsy, and it wasn't because they were ashamed or anything like that, Roxanne. I think it's because my parents explained it to me back then. They put kids with epilepsy in special schools, and they knew that I didn't need to go into a special school or anything like that. Also, they said that my health insurance rates would go up, and they didn't want that to happen. The only people that knew, as far as I know, is my parents and my sister. I'm not sure even if my grandparents knew. They might have. But if you explain petit mal epilepsy, it's basically where your brain shuts off for about 5 to 10 seconds. It's like you're daydreaming. And if a teacher saw it, they probably just think you're spacing off, you're daydreaming or something like that. But it usually happened in the morning when I'd be at the breakfast table or something like that, and my dad would be snapping his fingers in front of me, and I would have no idea that it was going on. I actually didn't find out about it until I was like 15 years old, and finally my sister talked my parents into letting me know. And at first I thought, well, are they ashamed of me? And they weren't ashamed of me at all. They just didn't want it to get out, and they were afraid that if they told me, they would let me know. And finally, a lady who had worked, I call her our cleaning lady. Her name was June, but she was actually a family friend, and she loved cleaning our house, and she became one of my mom's best friends. Had a seizure, and she drove off the road, and she had a neurologist that she had gone to, and I went to that neurologist, and he did an EEG on me, and it's hard not to get emotional, because he said, you know, son, you no longer have epilepsy. And Roxanne, after that, I could get my driver's license, and I haven't had it ever since. Now, I was kind of scared about 3 or 4 years ago, because on Juneteenth, I went out and mowed the lawn, and I hadn't been drinking any water. And the next day, I worked at the radio station in Newton, and I didn't feel right. Something was just not right, and I don't know what it was. Well, my co-host on the morning show said, "You just don't seem right," more than usual. And so she said, "You know, you ought to go to the emergency room." So I did, and the doctor used a pen light and said, "Follow my eyes." Well, I did, and I had a seizure. Now, in Iowa, if you have a seizure, you're not supposed to drive for 6 months. Well, they did a CAT scan on me, and they examined me and everything seemed pretty normal. So I had to bum rides from people because of that, and I was afraid that my seizures had come back from being a child. But it turns out that wasn't the case at all. It was just due to dehydration, because I went to Mercy One, and they examined me, and they did the EEGs and all that, and they tried to make me have a seizure, and I did not. So again, another blessing there, and I'm glad I didn't have that. So that's my story. I'll stop talking about it. Let's hear your story about how you got into the Epilepsy Foundation and about your daughter, Roxanne.
Well, thank you, Jamie, and thank you for sharing your story and your journey with petit mal seizures, which you probably don't know, but they're called absence seizures now.
I didn't know that, and I'm glad I'm talking to you, because this is going to be an education for me.
Yeah, generalized absence seizures. Generalized means the seizures comes on both sides of the brain, and absence, they get the name because when you have a brief staring spell, you see the absence of the seizure. So.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I haven't done this podcast before, but I just want to say it was my good friend Jim Beam, and that is his real name. That's not his radio name, but he's a longtime radio guy that used to work here at WHO, told me about a car show that's coming up in August at, I believe it's a DMAC, and it's about epilepsy awareness. And he told me about it, and I thought, you know what? I need to do a podcast about this. So that's how this happened. But anyway, tell me about your journey.
Sure. So my husband and I had 4 kids in less than 4 years, and we had twins in the middle. And it was our daughter, one of the twins, that had her first seizure in May of 2006, only we didn't know it was a seizure. We didn't know anybody with epilepsy, or so we thought. And she was playing in the backyard and fainted, and then she was tired and she slept. Well, come to find out later, that was a seizure. She had 2 of these episodes, and then her basic diagnostic workup, which is very typical to what you described and what other people describe, is her local pediatric or her local family physician. We live in rural Iowa, so it was just our family physician referred us to a pediatric neurologist. And basic diagnostic workup was a 1 to 2 hour video EEG where they put the electrodes on her head to monitor the brain waves. They did an MRI, And they drew a lot of blood work, and then they took all that data, and they knew right away from that data that she had epilepsy. And she didn't have any episodes while she was hooked up to that EEG, but we were told she had that abnormal brainwave pattern. She was having subclinical seizures, so they knew she had epilepsy. And then her MRI showed she had lesions throughout all the white matter in the right half of her brain. And they didn't know what it was. They thought it could be reversible or it was a low-grade astrocytoma. Well, repeated MRIs showed it was stable, but they still don't know what caused it, why it occurred, but it was throughout her whole right hemisphere. So she had frequent type of seizures, and she went on to have the generalized tonic-clonic seizures, which used to be called grand mal. Those were the scary ones. She would collapse to the ground. Her whole body would get stiff. Her limbs would jerk and shake. And her lips would turn a very dark bluish purplish color. And to be honest, Jamie, there were times we thought we lost her.
Yeah.
Her breathing was so faint.
I can imagine.
It was so scary. I had 3 other children, and they witnessed a lot of these seizures. And trying to keep her safe, she had to wear a helmet. She was going to the school for preschool, and there was one time she was playing outside and she collapsed into a tonic-clonic seizure, and she was within a couple inches of hitting that brick building. And that's when we started, the school recommended a seizure helmet. And so she had to wear a helmet to school, but it protected her head because she didn't have warnings for most of her seizures. Some seizures she did. She also had the staring seizures, the absent seizures like you have, that you described, Jamie. And then she also had the wandering seizures, the focal impaired aware seizure, where you can walk but not talk. And so what those seizures look like is she would start wandering, confused, disoriented, with no sense of purpose or direction. And she was very clumsy with her movements. And if she was trying to talk, her speech was slurred. You could just look at her and tell she wasn't right. But she didn't collapse. There was no jerking and shaking with those seizures. And so that was another common kind of seizure. It would last about 1 to 3 minutes and end on its own. But after a lot of her seizures, she would need to sleep for 2 to 3 hours. And if we prematurely woke her up because our family needed to go somewhere, I couldn't hardly wake her up. It's almost like the brain knows how long it needs in order for it to reset itself. Well, the frontline treatment for epilepsy and seizures is medications. And there's a lot of medications that work for many people with epilepsy.
So you have to try to find the right one.
Yeah, so it's important to get to a specialist called a neurologist. For a child, it's a pediatric neurologist. And for the majority of patients, or quite a few patients, the first or second medication they try for that seizure type does a pretty good job of managing the seizures, and that person can go back to the quality of life they were leading prior to the diagnosis. But our daughter kept failing medication after medication after medication, and none of the meds were worked. And so she was referred to a certified level 4 epilepsy center. And we only have one of those in our state, and that's at the University of Iowa. And so there they have neurologists who are board certified in epilepsy called epileptologists. And then they're epilepsy experts. And so they work with patients with the hard to treat type cases. So, and our state has come a long way with the number of epileptologists that we have in our state compared to when our daughter was diagnosed, which there wasn't any for pediatrics all those years ago. Well, anyway, she continued to have these lesions or abnormal white matter, Jamie, but after the course of 2.5 years, her MRI showed that the right half of her brain was shrinking and disappearing, and the doctors didn't know why. So then they thought it was this rare Rasmussen's encephalitis. So then we had to get to a specialist that's seen this rare type. And so we were able to find a specialist that had seen a few of these cases, and the recommendation was plasmapheresis, IVIG, steroids, and a hemispherectomy. And so we ended up with the hemispherectomy because she was 5 years old by now. She was diagnosed at the age of 2. And so we had to get rid of the bad half of the brain to save her good half. And so it's just been such a blessing. It stopped the seizures. She's had a few breakthrough seizures. She's had hydrocephalus, which required a second brain surgery, but She is 22 years old.
great.
We are her legal guardians, but her seizures are managed. She's only
Good.
on one seizure medication instead of 4 or 5 like she
Good.
was younger. And she's working. She takes public transit back and forth the 12 miles to town to work. She works at a local daycare center.
Oh, good for her.
And she's just doing amazing. And none of that would have been possible with the frequent, uncontrolled, unpredictable seizures. And there's still a third of people with this diagnosis that have uncontrolled seizures, and they're unpredictable. And that's why we need to fight so hard and continue to advocate and get more research for a cure.
You betcha. Well, God bless her, and I'm glad that she's doing better and has a job and coming along. So that leads me to my next question. What is the Epilepsy Foundation all about?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we asked the same thing. So after her first surgery, there was no Epilepsy Foundation in our state when she was diagnosed. So I remember calling out of state, and they were not familiar with our in-state resources. So the first thing I did is we need to connect families. And so I reached out to another family, and we started the first epilepsy walk. And so by the time we started the first epilepsy walk, which was a year after her hemispherectomy, we started actually in Merle Hay Mall in 2010. And it's been going every year since. And then another family member from Eastern Iowa was able to secure state funding to open up an office space and to do programs and services and information and referral and support groups. And so, and then I served as a volunteer, and then I was hired in 2012. So I've been with the foundation for over 14 years. And so the mission of our foundation and our outreach is outreach and education to improve the lives of Iowans with epilepsy through education, advocacy, research, and connection. So we have our epilepsy learning portal, learn.epilepsy.com. We have multiple seizure education modules and programs available on demand for Iowans at no cost.
Oh, really?
Yes. And you can become seizure first aid certified. So that program is about an hour and a half. You can learn how to recognize the 4 most common kinds of seizures, how to help somebody in a seizure, seizure first aid, what to do, what not to do, seizure triggers, situations that are definite medical emergencies for seizures, and how to support somebody with epilepsy and or seizures. Mm-hmm. And so we have trainings on there for school personnel. We passed our seizure safe school law last year in the state of Iowa, which requires all public schools and accredited non-public schools to do a seizure training every 2 years, and consistent with our guidelines. So we have our seizure first aid ready program, or seizure training for school personnel program. And then making sure that there's a seizure action plan on file at the school. So there's an emergency protocol in place, because the action plan for seizures is different for every person with epilepsy, because depending on the type of seizures, the frequency of seizures, if they're controlled or not, their seizure triggers, the activities, the school-sponsored activities, athletics, and all these different things that student is involved in. So the training, and we do live education programs at no cost on Zoom, or if it makes sense, in person. And then we also do virtual epilepsy empowerment groups. We host 2 every month for Iowans to connect with each other, ask questions, share about their medications, the surgeries, the vagus nerve stimulator magnet, the ketogenic diet, the modified Atkins diet, or whatever type of treatment protocol their neurologist has them on. Seizure alert devices, seizure dogs. I mean, we get all sorts of questions, but it's a great way for people to share experiences. We also help walk the person through their journey with epilepsy and access meaningful resources. You mentioned driver's license. We've worked with the Iowa DOT on improving the medical reporting requirements, and it is a 6-month restriction. But a lot of people don't realize is we have public transit in all 99 counties in Iowa, and not all states have that. There are mobility coordinators in different areas of state to help figure out transportation options for somebody that can't drive, because your friends and family may not always be available. In some areas, it's just during the business week, but there's volunteer transportation services in some areas of the state.
Yeah, I was very lucky because I was working at the radio station in Newton, and we started our morning show at 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, my brother-in-law was working at a place that I'm not going to name the place, but there was a bookkeeper there that got up and worked out at 2 o'clock in the morning at Anytime Fitness. And because she was an early riser, she volunteered to take me to work every day. And my significant other, my lady, would take me home from work. So I was very lucky about that. So I guess I wanted to also ask, you talked about diet and
Different treatment options.
Different treatment options and things like that. I had heard at one time, and I don't know whether this is true or not, and I'm glad I have you in this, that your diet is important about epilepsy too, and what you eat and that kind of thing. And I don't know whether it's an urban myth or something, but changes in fat and how you consume that and that kind of stuff has an effect on epilepsy. Is that true, Roxanne?
So when you look at the data and research, there's really good research and data that supports the ketogenic diet for managing seizures in some people with epilepsy.
And what is that all about?
So it's a very strict ratio, and you got to weigh your food. You work with, so if you're looking at, and it's more common in children, there's more data supporting children on this diet than adults. It's harder for adults because we've been exposed to sugar, bad eating habits, and all those things over the years. But when somebody's at an epilepsy center, and if they talk about that treatment option, and that's a treatment, whatever the treatment option is, a decision between that patient, that family, and that neurologist. But so the ketogenic diet, if they're wanting to try, they think that's a potential good fit, then it usually requires inpatient hospitalization, working with a team, that pediatric epileptologist, a dedicated dietitian, a nurse practitioner, and getting on that very strict regimen, because it's very important to have that support.
Is it fruits and vegetables, that kind of thing, or what is it about?
Well, it's high fat.
Is it?
Well, there's different ratios, so I don't want to misspeak, but there's different ratios.
So you're going to speak in generality.
In generality, yeah, the ketogenic diet, and then there's a little bit more flexibility with the modified Atkins diet. The low glycemic diet is sometimes recommended. But it's not just the weight loss diet that most people think about when they hear the ketogenic diet. This is very rigorous, requires inpatient hospitalization, it requires a medical team, and strict follow-through with the school, the daycare, wherever that person is. Because if they get off on their ratio, then it'll throw the diet off.
Okay. Right.
But it can manage seizures if the medications don't work or other treatments don't work, or perhaps a person is not a candidate for brain surgery, depending on the location of the brain the seizures originate from.
Okay. When I was in 9th grade, I had an ulcer, and they had to examine me for this, and that's a whole nother story. We won't get into that. But I thought it was kind of weird because they taped some tongue depressors to the headboard of my bed. And I just thought, okay, whatever, because again, I did not know that I was epileptic. Is it true that people who are epileptic try to swallow their tongues?
So that is a common myth.
Okay.
People, according to the medical professionals, people cannot swallow their tongues during a seizure, but they may bite their tongue or bite their cheek.
Okay.
And so they used to teach that back in the day, to put an object in somebody's mouth. You never want to put an object in somebody's mouth during a seizure. They could chip their tooth, they could break their jaw, they could potentially choke on a piece, and harm could come to that person in that seizure.
If somebody is at a restaurant and they see someone having an epileptic seizure and they're by themselves, nobody's with them, and they're falling on the floor, having problems, how should someone deal with that?
So that's why we want to get everybody seizure first aid trained, because 1 in 10 people will have a seizure and 1 in 26 will have epilepsy. It's a lot more common than what we realize. So when they go through the training, if somebody drops to the ground, they're in a convulsive seizure, it's recommended that the bystanders stay with the person, remain calm, time the seizure, It's stay safe side. So you stay with them. You keep them safe by moving objects. So if you're in a restaurant, you'd want to move the chairs, the table out of the way so they're jerking and shaking. No potential harm can come to their limbs. And then turn them on their side if they're not awake and aware. And what this does, Jamie, it allows the saliva to drain out of the side of the mouth. You never want to leave them on their back. The medical professionals say all that saliva can go back in your throat, and the person at potential risk for aspirating on that fluid. So by rolling the person to their side, it helps keep the airway clear. It allows the saliva to drain out of the side of the mouth. You want to cushion their head. You're probably not going to have a pillow in that restaurant, but perhaps there's a hooded sweatshirt or a coat or a bag, something soft to protect the head from hitting that hard surface. You want to remove the glasses. And most seizures will run through its course and end on its own in an average length of time. And so for a convulsive tonic-clonic seizure, it's 1 to 3 minutes.
Do you need to call 911 or you just let it run its course?
So it depends if it's a familiar person and they know it's a familiar type of seizure for their kind of epilepsy, and that's what it typically looks like and lasts, and 911 may not be needed. If it's, say, a waiter or waitress in that restaurant, they don't know the person is alone, then they may need to call 911 because they don't know that person's medical history, what's common and what's not. It could be a first-time seizure.
Okay. Roxanne, we're going to unfortunately have to wrap this up, but I want to revisit this topic again. Folks, I record this on my phone, and it's been a busy morning. I just went back to work at WHO this morning, and so I've had to use my phone quite a bit. But promise me that you'll be my interview guest again sometime in the near future.
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
Jamie.
I want to make sure I pronounce your name right. Roxanne
Kogel.
Kogel? Okay. Her husband was a meteorologist with the National Weather Service for a number of years, too. So mad respect for him and mad respect for you for what you do for the Epilepsy Foundation. And we're going to do a video here before my battery runs down. Make sure you check that out on the outandaboutwithjamiegrout.com website and on my YouTube channel. And before we wrap up, how can people support the Epilepsy Foundation?
So you can reach out to us at epilepsy.com/Iowa.
Okay. And can people make contributions at that site?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Roxanne, for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamie.
That's going to wrap it up for this edition of Out and About with Jamie Grout. Other fine sponsors include Westside Java Coffee Bar. Stop on in to Wet Your Whistle. They have all kinds of tasty drinks there at Westside Java Coffee Bar, or try some of their cookies. Made Right Sandwich Shop, open 7 days a week for delicious breakfast. I've had it many times. Or try some of their other things that are on the menu, including the chicken sandwiches, the tenderloins. They have specials all the time. Or, go through the drive-thru. Or give them a call for their phone ahead service at 792-4166. Also, Jersey Freeze in Monroe. Try the Van and Bonbon Freezer, their malts, their shakes, or other ice cream treats. And Lynette Baker, Halo Branded Solutions. Until next time, out is out. See ya.